with community correction.
Good morning. This morning we have 74 individuals on our program, 3 on CTP, we have 5 juveniles, we also have 19 in the pipeline. I have completed our annual report for the state. I'm a data geek, so I really get into this, so I won't bore you with everything, but there's some significant figures I would like to relay to you. So what the state's going to be most pleased with is the money that we saved them by keeping automatically DOC eligible felons out of prison and keep them in the community. So last year we supervised 103 of those high-level felons with an average length of stay of 235 days. If you take those numbers and use the DOC per diem of 5503, what it costs to house a DOC prisoner now, we saved the state $1,157,841. So hopefully that'll correlate to maybe some additional grant money.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Very good.
I've got copies of the annual report. Anybody like that?
Yeah, I would. Is that a
just
hard
a one
copy
page?
or a?
Yeah, it's a hard copy, just one page.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
If there's anybody you don't know, feel free to reach out to me. Mike will have one at the meeting in a couple weeks. I'll be presenting this to my board at the end of February. Thanks, sir. You're welcome.
This is really good. I think sometimes I know I'm guilty of not really appreciating the scale of business you run over there. You know, this kind of puts it in perspective.
I think it's great to see things like this annually from a lot of different departments. I know Liz does one for the area plan commission.
In the past, this was a multi-page report, but we're giving them so much data on a bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. They gave us the ability to condense this, which is very, very helpful to us.
All right. Anything else for us?
That's all.
Any questions for Brett?
Recovery coaches.
A recovery coach is it's kind of a step up from somebody in the NA program or the AA program that's a sponsor. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And it's kind of a step below a counselor. So we're using those from the time that they're released from jail to the time I can get them into some serious programming. It's kind of the hot trend right now. Healthy Communities has one right now, and they're actually recruiting more to become recovery coaches. So it's just kind of the trending way in recovery right now.
Anything else for Brett? Keep up the good work. Thank you. Probation report is the next item, and you have in your packet the January update. Good start to the year, just $560 for juvenile detention. That one's always kind of a bit of a crapshoot. It can jump out of nowhere on us here, so that's good to have a good start. That brings us to new business, and really the primary item of business that we have today is the readoption of the salary ordinance with some changes and corrections that reflect some of those additional appropriations we did at the meeting on the 26th. And for the benefit of those in the gallery, those changes completed the adjustment of some salary changes we made at budget time that went above advertised amounts. And so in order to make those official, we had to do an additional appropriation in January. So that then necessitates passing that on through to the salary ordinance to reflect that change in the salaries. And Clark, I believe you wanted to bring up an issue for us to consider.
Well, I just think that we, as I looked at that report this morning, we need to be maybe a little bit more clear because it is a public record on the salaries being paid out of the EMS fund and hospital contractual fund. And I know at budget time, we've got a list. I've read copies of them. If you want to pass them down. And so it is public record in our budgeting process. But I think it would be helpful to maybe clarify that in the salary ordinance to I know there's more complexities out there with different pay grades. You got paramedics, EMTs, this, that, and the other, but still, all the other departments do itemize their people, and I know sometimes a lot of people get paid out of different funds. You know, Rick now has to split up the restricted motor vehicle highway to the unrestricted. So you have to know where they're all getting paid from, but it's there.
I've talked a little bit with Britt about this here this morning. Britt, let me ask you this question. If we wanted to make that change, could we cover that in this vote? Like amend the salary ordinance as presented to say we wanted to break this out, and then that way we wouldn't have to do it again? One thing Clark brought up is that the numbers that we see on here, I believe, were the numbers you initially presented. It would not reflect the numbers that we eventually adopted. I think these were 2% raises, and
I pulled these out of my budget book.
We did 1% raises. So
yeah, I did a 1%. I'm not sure where
I couldn't find it
yours
this
is
morning.
at. That's okay.
Yeah.
So
and let me just state that the reason the ordinance is how it was is because that's how it was.
It's always been like that.
I copied the format that it was before. It was not my decision to lump that all together.
Oh, I wasn't pointing fingers.
Yeah.
I do agree, because, you know, when you sit here and look at how everything else is broken up, it's not the same way here.
Yeah, it makes
It
sense.
needs to be uniform.
Sure.
I think there could be an assumption from a taxpayer looking at it that you take that number, divide it evenly amongst all the positions, and that wouldn't be accurate. So
Right.
I do think we want to be transparent and try to accurately reflect what the council did.
Well, there's a few places in here where we lump like the jailers. Okay, but up to the side, it says exactly how many there are,
Mhm.
so you know exactly how to divide the money.
At what rate? Yeah.
One other thing was this temporary increase that we've given Greg for the COVID upgrade on part-time pay. That's not reflected in the ordinance either. I don't know where it should be or not.
I wouldn't think that it.
It's a matter of
Should there be a
reference.
note? Should there be an asterisk or
I
a
wonder if
footnote?
we shouldn't, just for for audit time.
Then
We
it's
can
all
look at that,
in one
sure,
place.
yeah.
Yeah,
So what, I can't remember exactly how we did that. Did we authorize a rate or just authorize a percentage increase for
I
kind of an
believe it was
emergency?
a rate, right?
I thought it was $26.
I did, that's what I.
Okay.
Is it through the end of March, Jeff?
Yes.
And so it comes up for review.
Yeah, we
at the end
did,
of March.
but I couldn't remember how we.
We can always listen again and see what the motion was.
As it stands right now, that would be the rate through March, and then it would go back to the standard rate unless we would vote affirmatively again to continue that at the higher rate. So I think maybe we would want to put both of those rates in the salary ordinance,
Sure.
denote the portion of the calendar year that one applies. And
And that's fine, when we get audited, they come in and say, we want your ordinance, and, you know, they start thinking through things, so that's fine.
so we've got the ordinance as presented to us, and then I think what I'm hearing, and I'll ask you to make it in the form of a motion, but I want to state it, make sure that we're all on the same page. It would be that we would propose two amendments. One would be to add that line denoting the first quarter change in the part-time for EMS. And the second would be to have the positions for listed out that are covered under that 1.2 million for EMS that would list paramedics and EMTs. And we'll do it in the same way that you presented this report, but we can put the correct.
And also on the hospital.
And the same thing for hospital contractuals. We'd have those two departments that we're going to break those positions out. So with that being said, if everybody feels comfortable with the salary ordinance with those two amendments, well, first of all, I think we should have a vote for the amendment. Okay. To amend the.
I'll make a motion for both those amendments then. We do it together. Or what?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay,
For the record.
first for the, making note of the temporary $26 pay increase through the first quarter. I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Clark and a second by Jake that we make that amendment to reflect the special first quarter rate on part-time. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0.
And then secondly, I make a motion that we amend the salary ordinance to reflect the, in more detail, like we were presented at budget time, the salaries that we budgeted for the EMS and the hospital contractual funds.
I think I've got Mike on that. That's so Clark with the motion, Mike with the second. Everybody clear on that?
Yes.
Any questions?
More uniform.
Yeah, right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0 as well. So now I'll entertain a motion to approve the salary ordinance as amended.
I'll make a motion
You have a motion by Jake to approve that ordinance, a second by Mike. Sorry, I keep looking to my left and not to my right. I'm sorry for shortchanging you guys. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Britt, Janet, you feel comfortable? We've covered everything you need there? Okay.
Yep, it's good.
Okay. Clark, thank you for catching that and bringing it up. The next item says encumbrances, but we don't actually have any encumbrances, do we? Or did we miss one?
Oh, no,
Okay.
no, sorry.
That's what I thought. So
Yep.
the next item really is additional appropriations, of which we only have a couple since we took care of most of those on the 26th of January. We have an appropriation request from Extension for $5,000. This is a grant that we've received for a salary that we're appropriating to the correct line item so it can be spent. That is the only item from the general fund. Then the next item is from LEPC, and I really appreciate, Renee, thank you for getting that in so early. I know sometimes we've done it later in the year in the past, but this is effectively appropriating their budget for the entire year. If you look at that, it's clearly broken out. Supplies, stationery and printing, emergency planning, meeting stipend, training, postage, seminars, equipment, computers and peripheral devices for an entire budget of $15,168.62. And it's always helpful to me if you take just a minute. I know you've done it before and I should know it and I can never remember, but where the funding for LEPC comes from.
So in the counties, we have tier 2 facilities, CF Industries, different ones that have chemicals, things like that. They have to report those to the state.
Okay.
And then in order for LAPC to receive the funding from the state for those, we have to do our drills and things like that. We have to meet certain requirements each year. And then we receive those funds. So all of our money just comes from the state for those businesses that do the reporting of their hazardous materials, chemicals.
So that's why we always have the importance. I usually ask for a volunteer. Jake's done that, and I think maybe Mike's done it in the past. I know Mark Mitchell did it in prior years where we have a council representative on this tabletop, and they get more points the more elected officials attend, and then that helps fund this budget. So that's kind of completes that circle.
We did have our tabletop
Yeah.
last week. It went really well. You know, it's amazing what Zoom can do with all, we had little breakouts, you know, the sheriff was, you know, part of it. We were EMA several, you know, the schools, it worked out well, you know, and then in theory, what we typically do, if we do a tabletop, then the following year, we do a full scale exercise based off of the tabletop. Like you learn what you want to do from that and then put it in as a full scale. So that's our goal for next year.
This represents the emergency planning. So if CF Industries has a major anhydrous ammonia leak, this is where we have the plan in place to how to deal with it. Who's going to evacuate the city? Who's doing what role? All those kinds of things. A major chemical spill at Co-Alliance or things of that nature. So that's what this budget is for. It's really important. So that's the 15,168.62. Board of Health. $500 to cover claims that were turned in for reimbursement of travel time. They've had to leave, no doubt, go to get some trainings and some things like that. And then prosecutor from the 4D incentive budget, $1,100 for a new shredder. Any questions on any of those? I entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Jeff, and I believe I had Ron with the second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Did we have any transfers for approval? I don't believe we did. Yeah. Those kind of all got covered in January as well. We have to catch up here on a couple of reviews of financial reports. We have both the December and the January. Typically, we don't take any action, just have received and reviewed them and state for the record as such. Anybody have any questions on any of those numbers?
I combed through them those months, didn't see hardly any negatives. They were all grant related, like I learned. So I thought they looked good.
I'd entertain a motion to approve that.
So moved.
So a motion by Clark, a second by Jeff to I guess we'll say we've received, not approved, but we've received the monthly financial statements for December and January. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Council reports. I do have one report I'd like to make, and that I was involved in some calls over the last few days. I want to report that we're going to have a change in how we do the long-term financing for the water and sewer project. All along from the very get-go until just the most recent days, we've been assuming we were going to go through the state revolving fund and do that because they had a pretty attractive rate, and we could do that financing over a longer period of time than a traditional 20-year bond. The market's kind of morphed as we've had these really low interest rates to the point that the open market now is lower than the rate that we can get with the state revolving fund, and now there is a 30-year bond available on the open market. So Baker Tilly has recommended that we pivot and now go to an open market funding because it will cost us less money to do that bond financing that way. So we had a conversation with SRF. They're okay with that. They certainly understand. They've got plenty of projects they can give the money to outside of ours. And then also we had, more importantly, we had a communication and a conversation, a Zoom meeting with EDA, the Federal Economic Development Administration. That's who's giving us the $3 million grant. And when we applied for that grant, we had indicated we were funding it through SRF. And they are in the process right now of reviewing the new plan of going to open market. So Baker Tilly and Costas, the attorney, they're giving them all the information they need to show, it's not really any different. It's just where the source of funding would be coming from, and it's in the best interest of the county to do this. Assuming we get that approval, which we're hoping to get in very short order, we're going to try to get to market as quickly as we can while these rates are so low. They're historically low, and see if we can lock this, get some savings just through the interest being so low. So a positive development, but it is a change that could see us. I don't know that there's any role that the council will have to play. Mark, you may have to approve a new document because we had made a certification to the federal government that we were going to use SRF. And if we're going to change, you may have to change that certification, but I don't think there's anything the council would have to do. I just want to share FYI that positive development. Everything's going well. We're on schedule. We've got water now. It's hooked up to NHK. We've got the sewer, the lift station by the NHK facility is there and operational. So now wastewater can come to that lift station and be pumped out via truck and brought into we don't have all the pipes obviously connecting everything, but we can now take their wastewater, bring it by truck into the city. So it's functioning. Everything's functioning out there now at the interchange. So it's all coming together very nicely and on schedule. Any other council updates? Okay. Commissioner report, anything, Mark?
I have nothing.
Okay. Department heads, any department heads need time with the council? Looks like maybe Liz does. Liz? Let's talk about that.
Oh, you're
Send an
right.
email out, but I don't think we ever
I
talked
thought
about
they
it.
could be shared.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I would like to just bring that up for the record.
I was just pressure out on that check. All right, so as Clark noted, usually I try to do an end of the year report each year. This sums up sort of what we saw in economic development in terms of permitting and things for the year before. And then I usually just include some comparisons so you can see a trend. I do a much more fleshed out, longer version of this for the Plan Commission, but for each of the legislative and fiscal bodies throughout our jurisdiction, I try to sum it up to what's most relevant to them. So I've included some basic information on permitting violations and Board of Zoning Appeals hearings. For the purposes of County Council, unless you have a question, otherwise I'm going to focus in on the financial elements and the permitting year-end report rather than the violations of the BZA, since those have less to do with fiscal matters. So this last year in 2020, the city and the county, so we're able to see data for everyone within Clinton County except for the town of Michigan Town. So that includes Frankfort. We issued 1,327 permits. That was up from 1,024 in 2019 and 862 in 2018. So we're definitely seeing a really solid growth trend in permitting. Our new homes stayed about the same. We issued 34 in 2020. That's a decrease from 35 in 2019, but I don't really consider one home to be statistically significant. It's sort of random when somebody comes in to get the permit and start. I'd say we're pretty well on par there with what we have been. Frankfort issued 10 new homes. That was an increase from 6 the year before, so they saw a little bit of growth. They've got a new subdivision there on the southeast side of town. They're starting to sell lots, which is really positive for the community. And so they're starting to see some new houses over there. In Clinton County, we created 9 new subdivisions, which supplied 12 new lots for building opportunities. And I thought these were kind of the more exciting numbers. So in 2020, we issued in total new valuations, this is the worth of what was built, $93,172,239 and an odd 27 cents worth of new valuation. That's an increase from just shy of 79 million in 2019. So to put that in perspective, that's an 18% increase. That's significant for 2 reasons. One, we're a rural county, no matter how you cut it. You know, we have some developed areas, but rural counties, regardless of the economic environment in the U.S., struggle. It's just the way it is. Population moves to city centers. So 18% increase would be impressive no matter what. But in addition, we're in the middle of COVID. So there's a lot of urban areas that are seeing the effects of COVID in a negative way financially right now in terms of their growth. Overall, nationwide, growth is declining. In Indiana, we're not necessarily seeing that trend. We seem to be able to use this time to grow. And for us here in Clinton County, 18% is stunning, in my opinion. And then to break that out with just Clinton County section, that was 43, almost 44 million, up from about 15 million in 2019. Now, I will note, NHK by themselves was 20 million. So sometimes you have a big project that shifts things, but even if you take the 20 million out, you still have 6 million in growth that occurred without the NHK project. So the trend remains consistent. We issued as a community 75 million roughly in commercial and industrial construction. So that's a 15% increase in those sectors. And for Clinton County, that was 28,851. 28 million, almost 29 million, and that was up from almost exactly 4 million in 2019. And again, if you take out the 20 million for NHK, we still doubled. So that's nothing to sneeze at either way. We anticipate, this is where everyone has to keep in mind, you have growth, but then sometimes the valuation of your growth can cause you to have outliers. And at some point, we're going to see a year where we appear to decrease, even if we're still growing. So we all happen to know that we have a major project coming in for permitting for solar within the county this next year. So I expect that our 2021 numbers are going to be insane for our community, which tells me then most likely our 2022 numbers are going to appear to shrink. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's happening. It just means we're not likely to continue grabbing projects with that amount of assessed valuation all in one year. And so, just to know, we may hit that point. I'll note these numbers are all just a tiny bit low. Sometimes we miss getting the valuation number in on a permit. staff all the way across did better in 2020. I'd say maybe 10 to 15% of permits were missing numbers, whereas in 2019 we were about 25% that were missing numbers. So we've been trying, but there is always that bit of inaccuracy. Just for the sake of interest, you can see our open violations and the commissioner's open violations, and then Board of Zoning Appeals breakout. But since none of those are financial in nature, I won't bore you going through them in detail. Do you have any questions for me?
I have maybe just some feedback or a
Sure.
request, and I don't know if this is very difficult to do, and I don't want to certainly put anything on your plate that is going to keep you from doing what your real job is, but I think it would be helpful for the council to have a breakout on this, say like the $93 million of new valuation, how much is in a TIF district and how much is not. So in other words, how much goes to the regular tax base and how much is kind of put off to the side in a TIF bucket?
In that area. Yeah, I can try to look at that. It'll take some time because we don't have anything in our permitting system that flags the TIF district.
Okay.
So we would have to manually check each
Well, that's
parcel.
what I mean. I'm not sure I want to ask you to go to that much trouble, but that would sure be something that you need to know.
I mean, I can think offhand. I know, the landfill had some stuff, and of course NHK, and there's been, I think there was this new home, I think, and then there's been a few smaller things out in that area. So I can try to take a general look and see if there's at least.
Yeah, maybe if we just knew which of the big ones were in the TIF district, that would help whittle that number down. I'm just really curious to know what went to the regular tax base, because we know that we have this problem of the declining farmland assessed value. And to the extent that it goes down, if we knew we had other assessed value offsetting that decline, I just would like to know that.
Sure. Yeah, I can try to take a look and see what I can bring back for you.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for the report. Any questions for Liz before she steps away? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd recommend, we get these great year-end reports. We'll start a folder with those year-end reports for 2020, and you keep them, because where they really have value is when you have a question and you want to look back at something and see how it's changed over time. And you can go back and look at these. I know we'll have a report here from Renee on 911, and we get one from the sheriff, and we get several. We usually get an extension report, and Rodney gives us grant reports and some things like that. So, Renee, you want to go?
Sure.
We've got the 911 report. We'll just kind of continue this year-end reporting.
I went ahead and passed those out before the meeting, so you should have a packet from me to look over. Again, just wanted to take an opportunity. I presented to the commissioners last month, kind of a year in review for 2020, and as we all know, it will never be forgotten, and nothing we anticipated when we started last year. So during 2020, we dispatched a total of 29,554 calls for service, and that includes police, fire, and EMS. We did see a call volume 11% decrease from 2019. We answered a total of 41,679 administrative calls, which is also down from the previous year. Our total 911 calls we received were 15,039, which is only a 2% decrease from the previous year. Our reports still show that 86% of our 911 calls are from a wireless device. As we all know, everybody is doing away with their home phones and just going to a cell phone. I also did run a report for our PSAP answer times. So a lot of times I have to report those for ISO? It's for insurance ratings for fire departments. So when they do their report, so one of the things that we have to report for them is our answer time. So from the time 911 rings till the time it's answered, 98% of the time we are under the 10 seconds or less. And that was for last year. So as you know, in March, when COVID kind of really ramped up, we had to make a lot of changes to our protocols that we do in dispatch, which is questioning our callers. It's not only for the public safety responders, but for the public. So we had to adjust things and put in new protocols in place for our questions that we ask people before we send police, fire, EMS out on those calls. We still utilize our texting. We did see a slight increase. We were up from 1,509 the previous year. We had 1,543. And if you break that out, we had a total of 58 texts to 911s, but our main utilization of it is when we text out. So when we get those cell phone hang-up calls, the butt dials, you know, that we get, so those were 1,485 last year. Again, our TextD platform, you know, it is very beneficial, especially if it's for the hearing impaired or it's not safe for someone to call 911. And we do get a lot of response back from people, you know, nobody answers their phone anymore when they don't know the phone number. So when we call back, usually a lot of times people won't answer us when we try to call back on the cell phone hang-up calls, but they will respond to a text. It shows you're receiving a text from Clinton County 911. And they'll say, yeah, sorry, the kids, you know, had the phone or it's in my pocket, things like that. So we do get a lot of response back on that. We continue to utilize our Nixle for mass notifications of events going on. Again, it's a free service that we offer to those in the county. Also, last year, Nixle began encouraging people to use the Everbridge application. So it's a free app on your phone. It's called Everbridge. So because people get tired of text after text after text. So, and then you can adjust your app to what you receive, you know, for those notifications. So they were encouraging people to use the app. Obviously, during the pandemic, I kind of cut down on our training. We were going to send people to lots of training last year, but we still, this year, we're doing a lot of online. We've already started that this year, but the state does provide a lot of savings for us, so we can, the state 911 board, all of our certifications, EMD, law, fire certifications, the state 911 board pays for all of those. So you have the initial investment, and then every 2 years we have to recertify. The state pays for those. So it's a lot of savings for us that way, so we can, you know, concentrate on new trainings for dispatch and things like that. So that kind of helps us on our budget with our training. In early summer of 2020, I received quotes for updating our vital CAD mapping that was very outdated. I appreciate the commissioners and council giving us our approval. Last week, I was able to get in and look at it. They sent me an email last night that we could start testing it. It will go into our practice database for us to test before we roll it out into our life system. So that's been a long time coming, and I'm excited about it. It will be wonderful because we have so many, you know, some of our new roads aren't even in our Spillman system, you know, so this will be a big benefit for everyone across the board. Again, during the budget process, we were able to add a new role to the department. The assistant director's position, that was really important. I was glad Alan and I had that talk last summer, and I was able to put that in and got the blessing from the council and commissioners. Colleen Dillingham moves from shift supervisor to the assistant director's position. She is going to kind of bridge that gap with our evening shift, our nighttime shift. Colleen's primarily going to work like a 6P to 2A. One of her biggest roles will be doing our quality assessment. So QA on all of our calls that we take, that's something I just don't have enough time for, and that's going to be big. It's not just looking for, you know, what went wrong. It's looking, you know, there's many calls that we don't listen to that they did a great job on that, you know, lots of calls like that. And it's also a learning curve. Like maybe there are some things in our protocols that we need to adjust because we've seen things, you know, occurring over and over. So Colleen, that's going to be huge, having this position, and it's going to bridge a big gap that I think we've been lacking. So I'm really excited about that. And Colleen started that in January 1st. And so really excited to continue with that. We're just looking forward to 2021, hoping that it comes a little better as we get moving. I do know this year I'm going to be looking prior to budget time, updating our radios and things like that as we go into the budget process. So you know, I'm going to be looking at things like that, and as we move forward. So finally, you'll see, and feel free to look through, I've attached lots of call statistics, different things for you to look at. Anybody has any questions when you look through those, just let me know.
Now that you have an assistant director, you can delegate to her to do the report.
No, you know, I tell you, this past summer, you all know I'm kind of I am a freak about, you know, doing things, and it was a big adjustment for me to say it's okay, like, I'm not gonna be here and let somebody else do those things. And they all stepped up and it was much needed for me as well. So it was a good, it's hard to relinquish some of that, but I've got good people and I know that. And so they stepped up to the plate and it'll be good.
Really, it's kind of amazing. There's a few of us here that can remember the pre-central dispatch days and just how smooth this is compared to the way it used to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Really,
I mean, it was
nice.
the best thing, when I was a dispatcher at Frankfurt Police and we answered a city 911 call and they needed fire or EMS and we had to say, stay on the line while I transfer your call, and had to transfer it to the fire department. We don't do that. We don't transfer those calls. So we take the call no matter what it is, so.
All right, great, thank you. Any questions for Renee? I just always appreciate this.
Yes.
And like the numbers. Awesome. Thank you, Renee.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else, Sheriff?
I did. Just the March 9th meeting you'll have at the end of the year for the jail, and also for the other things that have been added in the sheriff's office, federal inmates. Just to give you an update on the federal inmates and where we're at population-wise and everything else in the facility today. 165 total inmates. 60 of those inmates are federal inmates. 9 of those are the Department of Correction inmates. So a lot of work by Ashley and the staff have working with Federal Bureau of Prisons. We will maintain that 60 plus from the federal side of things, and in short numbers, that's just shy of $5,000 a day. So with that, we look forward to moving forward with the program as well as the benefits to the community as well. So commissioners allowed procedure, the process of purchasing vehicles at the last meeting there. So we're in the process of that to take delivery in probably 3 to 5 weeks, and then also get those vehicles upfitted for the deputies that are on the road. So with that, everything's moving forward and moving in a good direction. So does anybody have any questions about that? Anything with that? That's really all I truly had today. Other than,
Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
You might share, I thought it was interesting. We got kind of lucky getting those 8 vehicles.
Yes, absolutely.
Commissioner Brewer really kind of
He did.
pulled one out of the hat there.
He did. Chevrolet stopped the production of Chevy Tahoes all line, and they are going to just finish out the side. Obviously, fleet vehicles were shut down, and obviously they make more money out of a vehicle they sell to the public than they do to government. So in that aspect, we were unable to make an order, but the dealership in Fort Wayne, they are the main dealership for the state and other governmental agencies, and they had, I think, they ordered 85, and they had about 35 left that we were able to drop into that pool and grab. I didn't have a choice on color, but that's okay.
What was the purpose of the stop of production?
Material wise, there's obviously differences in tariffs now, and there's a lot of federal government issues that created the panic in the automotive industry. So what you saw was there are microchips that are probably from China, and their availability became zero for whatever reason. So either it was too late to retool anything. So I mean, literally, if your vehicle didn't have the frame wasn't sitting on the line, they are not going to build them. And then they put all the materials back to just public use, or where they're going to make the most money out of what materials they had left. So with that, they have to be made retool, redesign, whatever for 2022. But I mean, so that's the spillover from the changes that are federal government, I think. So, but it was definitely a microchip and material wise, and the material being steel. And,
We're able to get
We got lucky.
so we did get
Jordan
that.
did a lot of that legwork. So
Right, and so I mean, that's why I immediately sent him an email. You're the man, and appreciated him stepping out there and getting that done. And we were in the process of checking all the dealerships and seeing what was out there. So that process will work out. Will be fantastic. So with that, we're moving forward and getting things done. We are in the process of replacing 2 positions that came vacant from the resignation of 2 deputies over the last probably 2 months, 3 months. So with that, we have 2 openings there. So the agreed upon people that were going to be hired with the federal Bureau of Prison people, they will be obviously, but they're going to be pushed later to later probably in May or June before we can get to that process, get that second process started. We do have some great candidates, 4 people that are left in the hiring process. And we go through the polygraph portion of it now, and hopefully by the 14th or maybe a little bit later than that this month, we'll have them in front of the merit board to make a selection out of those people that are recommended. So we'll have 2 new deputies, and then hopefully later in the spring, early summer, we'll have a process for 2 more, which will put us, I think it'll be an increase. I think we'll have 20 on the road rather than, or 20 available rather than just what we have today. So with that, we'll be at a full boat plus 2.
Good.
So,
Sure. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, please. Is that the highest number you've had since you've been chair?
Yes,
165? Yeah, I thought that
Oh,
was-
no.
Oh.
Actually, when I took office, we were pushing 200 and over 200. And throughout this whole process and conversation with Alan and early on with Josh Hewitt, it was, we knew that there was going to be pre-trial release that the courts were working on and had been mandated, that the bond system was going to change. And with that change in the bond system, we didn't know if the reflex of it is releasing people on a promise to come back to court. It has actually worked out, I think, to a certain extent. I can't speak for the courts, but it's worked out better for us because people are appearing back in court without money invested. That's the bond. So what they did was they get reviewed the next day. Community Corrections comes in, and Brett can talk quite a bit about it because that's what his responsibility is to the courts. They come in, review these folks' charges, and then they're released and basically are promised to appear back. So they review the charges, review their criminal history, and they walk out. So we had to basically wait 1.5 years to find out where we were going to be and if this federal inmate program was even going to be feasible. So at about month 15, we kind of figured out, hey, our population is staying at about 120, 125, and then the increase of with the federal inmates, it hasn't changed anything contractually in our food contract or medical contract. They're all within what we had in, and it actually put us back to where we should have been because we contracted at well over 150 inmates at a time. Right? So we needed those inmates to fulfill, and not spend as much money per se. So we had to kind of wait on that pre-sentence release. And it worked out in the favor of the sheriff's office where our population actually declined in the facility. And then we were able to bring in federal inmates, and we started it with 30 and then increase it as we see that where we're staying. So at 165, if you take the 60 out, you take out the 9 to 20 federal or state inmates, we're going to be below 100 real quick. So, I mean, that's kind of, the beauty of pretrial release has worked in our favor as a community. In the Department of Corrections, they've removed people and they haven't brought us more people. And if they bring us more, we'll keep more, but we're kind of at their will because they decide who they're sending us or who we're going to keep from our own courts if they state sentenced. So, a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, but with the year end, we'll provide a year end for 20 as well with the federal program and the other things. I'm kind of waiting on maintenance right now. They're sending me some reports of the things that they had for 20, and once they get that submitted, I was hoping we'd have a little bit later of your meeting, but it's going to be the 9th. We have our Department of Corrections inspection on the 16th, and I'll obviously send everybody a report on that.
That thought just occurs to me. I know that we talked about in the January meeting, given our consensus support for the vehicle plan and all, but we need to schedule a time to actually appropriate the money. That total, right?
I do know that.
So you need to probably get that to Brett for March. We need to get that advertised so that we can appropriate the money to pay the bill when it comes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those first 8.
Absolutely. And I think, did I send you all that, Brett? Not yet.
I want to say, wasn't it like, I think it ended up being like 12,000 less than the
It was
initial
actually
quote.
less. It was actually less than where we got the quotes from everything else. So it was really, estimating moderately, we even came in under that.
Yeah.
So, fantastic.
Good.
Thank you for your support and everything else in 20, and hey, pushing through 21, we'll get it done. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sheriff. Any other department heads?
I had a council meeting, I made a council.
Okay,
Yeah. So John and I attended a meeting that Commissioner Hewitts and the coroner put together. I just talked about the last month's outside bill that we were seeing. I think we started to talk about, we were under the approach of maybe we should appropriate a little bit more money for the coroner for some of these services that people are probably going to start sending invoices for. And then Ed said that, we probably, since we don't use the hospital coolers, we don't have the privilege to use the coolers. So the county could probably get into that between $7,500 to $14,000. And then we just talked a little bit more about that and using the EMA building. And then he went farther and said that he thinks that he could get an examination table. And I didn't mean to chuckle, but that's just a conversation I never thought I'd be in. But he could put together this forensic type laboratory for $20,000 to $25,000. And it was kind of like put it on the agenda and get some information.
If we did that, who would conduct the autopsy? If there was a place
There would
to do
still,
it?
yeah, there's still a pathologist that they still pay to come in and do that.
There's a guy out of Fisher, I think.
Yeah. There's still that person that still comes
But
in.
presumably that charge would be considerably less than
Yeah,
having it done in another county where that county's
Right.
charging us for the use of the lab.
and he called it the Clinton County Ward. I think he just threw that out there. It was like, well, yeah, bring that information to commissioners or council.
Were you gonna continue to work on that? I guess my first question is we threw out the EMA building, but is the building itself, would it need upgrades beyond just the equipment or the cooler and the table? And maybe have
all
all
like,
They
you know,
said that it was actually pretty compatible with
Yeah.
what he was looking at there as far as the structure and everything. You had to build some new walls to
Yeah.
create a section and the cooler and that kind of stuff. Right now, I guess they're using local facilities to house or
Goodwood
store,
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have to use it any longer.
What would the capacity be? That would be
two.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, just a common question, but it is extremely expensive to store out of county or even in county, because I'm sure we will get a bill from IU Health to pay for storage, and it's in the area of over $300 a day. So, I mean, I see where the corner, so.
Sure.
Without a doubt, I mean, it's one of those things where we keep pushing money outside of our county to do some of these things. I've talked to some medical examiners, and they are very willing to travel and come to areas and do those medical exams that, and cost-wise, it's not as high as you would think, but it's a lot of money going out if we don't have that facility, for a rent facility and the doctor basically.
I know that it's been brought up in the past, doing something like this, but nobody ever really took the ball and ran with it to the point of putting together a quote for a facility. And so certainly, it's very obvious, and the sheriff makes a point.
On the
This isn't
investigative end of it as well, for law enforcement, whether it's Frankfort City, or whether it's the county, or even the state police, it makes it, I think it's more conducive to the investigation, that things happen within the county, that evidence or that information stays within the county, and we're not reaching out to Marion County, Muncie, or Tippecanoe County, trying to track that information down. So, but, that's like, if there's a need, I would support that 100% as far as where the corner is thinking of this.
well, there's no doubt this is an investment rather than just an expenditure. I mean, it would return.
Thanks for checking into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, thank you, Sheriff. Not to say that it could be a moneymaker, but I mean, it's
a money saver.
Money saver, but, yeah. I we could provide services that other counties don't have, so.
Well, and like you said, right now, they're storing that in local facilities, but they could actually say, "Oh, we're not gonna do that. But then we have to do something else. So it's really made sense.
That's a good point. Some good ones, and, Mark, again, so they just provide that service because it's always kind of, and I don't think that's fair. It's nice that they've done that, but, when if they're in use, then you can't do it.
They do that for free, don't
They do that for free, yeah.
And I agree with that. I appreciate it, but it doesn't seem right. They
Right, I agree.
ask a business to serve the county with
That's
no
right.
compensation.
What everybody else is. John, did we leave out anything?
Would you continue to work on that?
Sure.
And I think it'd be appropriate for the coroner to make the presentation for what his question would be, but I think in the meantime, he needs to be getting feedback, and if you two can continue to represent the council, I think I'm hearing that we're open to moving forward or continuing down this path, so.
I'll reach out to Ed and let him know that the council group.
And Mark, if you'd share that with your commissioner colleagues, that we're open to that.
Just a question, committee, should the local funeral home proprietors be considered in terms of the discussion? Since they've been doing it for free for so long, they'd like us.
That'd be good, yeah.
You another set of eyes on it.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because the county would be doing that because of them. I mean, we're not switching direction because of anything that you guys are doing.
They may have thoughts of just things to consider.
No,
as we move-
absolutely.
Move
Yeah.
forward with the facility.
Right.
Great.
That's a good point.
And thank them for their community service.
Sure.
As well.
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad we covered that. Anything else? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call the meeting adjourned. I like that. We must say now. Well, I took